I want to move next to the manufacturing sector. Now, I think most people will agree that, in spite of the transition we made in 1991, the high growth rates of the last 2-3 decades, one major shortcoming has been that we missed the bus on manufacturing. Right? So our growth strategy has been very different from China's. It's reliant more on skilled exports rather than having seen a massive boom in manufacturing. There are persistence problems like, for example, the informality in the manufacturing sector, the lack of job growth, and so on and so forth. So the Make in India program of the current government obviously tries to take that square on and try to address that with its associated things, right? And people have talked about all kinds of bottlenecks, skills, infrastructure, the legal system, enforcement of contracts, the ease of doing business, that we have too much red tape, too much bureaucracy. So there's a number of big major bottlenecks that have been pointed out as holding us back. So when you look at the governments, I mean, obviously one can't accuse this government of not paying attention to this problem because it's been one of the sort of most visible and vocal aspect of its campaigns. But is it doing well? Are the gamut and set of policies which is trying to create a manufacturing boom in India? And Arvind Subramaniam, for example, wrote this article recently in the Indian Express saying that wages are rising in China. China has all these other problems. So we are maybe at a crossroads where we can pick up on, let's say, the textile industry. That's the one he pointed out. So is the government proceeding wisely and intelligently on this front? One of them.
This, of course, in the context of the alarming job situation that we are facing. One of the big promises of Mr. Modi was to create jobs. Will be creating jobs. And this, I think, persuaded large number of young people in Bihar and UP. Unfortunately, so far, job creation stories does not look very promising. And I could give you numbers, but if anyone is interested later, I can give you numbers of the current employment situation. In fact, recently, the Institute of Human Development has brought out a whole report on the India employment report. There are some new numbers come up there. But let me mention that even this Arvind Subramaniam story of textile sector, which is a highly, not quite textile, it's the clothing sector, garment sector, which is a highly labor-intensive sector. And China is vacating this. But China is vacating this for quite some time. It's not just in the last 2 years. It was apparent to everybody the space that China was vacating is already being taken over. In fact, even Arvind's diagrams, I've seen that article, diagrams show that it's already largely taken over by two countries, two of our neighboring countries. One is Bangladesh in garments and Vietnam. And we are behind both of these countries in taking up that space. And it's a good thing that at least, Modi government should have, if job is their primary objective, Modi government should have taken it up 2 years back. But it's good that it's better late than never. I think last month, the cabinet approved a textile policy. But of course, I should tell you, the implementation of that textile policy is now in the very capable hands of Ms. Smriti Irani. So I don't know whether it's, we should be, I'm sure things will improve somewhat, but whether we'll succeed in creating jobs, I'm not that hopeful. Also, this is not a situation in which the world market is expanding, or the world market in labor-intensive goods is not very good. So I approve of the attempts that are being made. I approve, by the way, of the ease of doing business the Modi government takes seriously. But again, there are contradictions. On the one hand, yes, ease of doing business is being attempted, but everybody knows all decisions, major decisions are today made in the PMO. So there's been a lot of, not to talk of decentralization as these two persons talked about, there's been a lot of centralization of decisions in the PMO. Does it ease business? I'll say in some cases it makes more difficult, because if everything chokes up in that place, PMO, decisions take longer, and then it will not ease business, even though in other respects the government is attempting. And the government took with a lot of fanfare. I noticed they said our ranking in the ease of business World Bank ranking has improved. How much has it improved? We were number 134, and now we are 130. Mr. Modi in one of his rallies got a little carried away, and he said, we are now the best. I also approve of the skills initiative that the government has taken, but unfortunately, as of now, it has not produced a great deal. The numbers that I saw recently was that in our highly hyped skill program, at most, the numbers are there we have is about 5 million workers. That's much better than what it was before. But just compare with the numbers of a similar skills program China has now. It's more like 100 million. So you can get some idea of the scale problem, but it's a step in the right direction. The other thing which is important for job creation and Make in India is, of course, infrastructure. And again, the government is trying. Now, there are several problems. I think the road sector is doing reasonably well, but I'm not sure about the electricity sector. India needs a major electricity reform, which was tried in 2003 Electricity Reform Act. To this day, it is largely unimplemented or not fully implemented. Mr. Modi did a very good job. One of the good things he did in Gujarat was electricity reform. He has not succeeded in reproducing that in outside Gujarat and large part of India. There is a new program called Uday. It's supposed to be a financial restructuring of our electricity distribution companies. If you ask me what it is kicking the can down the road. Essentially, many of the huge debts of the distribution companies, they are now state government bonds. So you can imagine what will happen down the road when the state governments will be saddled with these huge debts. This is not what electricity reform should be. You need a different kind of thing.
Can I just interrupt you on that one?
Sure.
The critical thing, because this is important, right? The critical thing of getting it onto the state government's balance sheets is then borrowing limits kick in. And if that can be enforced, then this is a huge reform.
Yeah,
right?
Ideally, yes, but I can write down the scenario. A few years of now, then what is happening to the public banks now? The restructuring is essentially recapitalization of willful defaulter of the loans. Ultimately, many of the states, suppose UP defaults and says, no, we cannot pay back the state banks. And UP, with so many number of MPs, no central government, whether it's UPA or Modi government, will be able to do something about it.
But that's an unfair standard, because that logic applies whenever there's a big sovereign state. It could undo anything. I mean, all I'm saying is that I think this is a work in progress, and I think it should be presented as such. Rather, I mean, because by that logic, ex ante, whether you have FRBM, whether you have anything, the sovereign government could change.
But except Pratap, it's not presented as a work in progress. If it were presented as a work in progress, I think very few people would object. It is presented as a solution, which is why people look at it after a while and say, wait, it's not a solution, because already 10 out of 26 states are arguing that they need their, their percentage, their cap on borrowing lifted. At some point, one of them is going to be politically powerful enough or pivotal enough for that to happen, and then everyone is going to change for everyone. So it is a work in progress, but it's not presented as such, and they've stopped working on the structural change.
But in the electricity sector, I think one thing which is changing, right, which I think makes this somewhat more plausible, is electricity is going to be electorally one of the most important issues. That has changed, right? So one of the signs of progress is I think you have more state governments actually now beginning to recognize that if you don't deliver on whatever the yardstick is, 24/7 or 6 hours a day, whatever, and it's in their interest to actually begin to create the preconditions where there actually begins to look like a credible promise. So all I'm saying is that for something as difficult as this, I don't think the summary judgment can be, look, ex ante, none of this may work out. Maybe not, right? But it is actually for the first time that a lot of these elements are, the first time, if you actually get it on state government budget sheets and RBI hard borrowing constraint kicks in, that's actually a huge shift in discourse that is very different from 2003, right?
Pratap, this is not the forum to discuss the technical details. All I can refer you to is, I think last issue or the week before, EPW has a long article on the electricity, this Uday, by an energy ministry ex-bureaucrat. It's a detailed analysis of the problems with Uday. Let me just refer you to that. And if you still have objections, let's discuss it outside. Let me stop there.
Yeah, okay. So on the larger issue of manufacturing, Pratap and me.
No, look, just two quick things with manufacturing. So one is, again, all of this stuff that we are talking about, energy, infrastructure, logistics, this is part of the manufacturing story. Again, to be fair to government, and I think as a community, I think we need to ask ourselves harder questions. Sort of economists, political scientists, sociologists, which is, we have assumed up till now that there is a bunch of things that makes sense to do for their own intrinsic reasons. You need to educate people, you need to have ease of doing business, you need to cut energy costs, whatever, right? But the fact of the matter is we may be looking at a world where the answers to the job questions are not as obvious as most of us make them out to be, right? It's a question every country is debating, including China, by the way, right? We don't know in a sector like textile what the automation story is going to be. It's not clear to me that if robots can operate on patients, they can't actually cut shirts, right? So the question is, what framework do we have for saying what skills do we need that are actually tomorrow's skills, right? Should we be talking about the Skills India stuff in the way that we are, and some of it may be useful? Or should we be actually taking a more imaginative leap and saying, India, one of the good things about Indian private capital, right, is we are one of the few countries in the world where the big manufacturing guys are also the big IT guys, right? Tatas, Mahindras, right? Is that the future of manufacturing 15, 20 years down the line, right? My sense is that the rest of the world is beginning to ask those questions, including China, right? And I fear a little bit, and again, I don't think it's just the government's fault. I think it's just all of us, right? Because again, it's this sort of jobs thing. We may actually be a little bit late, and we're still trying to answer yesterday's question about jobs, not tomorrow's question.
Well, I hear this argument a lot. And
this is a question, I don't know.
No, but this is a very, very common thing that people say. Why is Narendra Modi going around talking about Make in India when everybody else knows that robots are going to be, 3D printers are going to be printing out our tables next week? Now, I'm just to caricature it, it's sort of, this is, my simple point about this is twofold. First, we are so small a manufacturing force right now, and we have such a small share of world trade. We are so far behind. We are still in yesterday, so maybe we should be still talking about yesterday's questions. All right? The rest of the world is day after tomorrow as compared to us. That's just the sort of situation that we're in. We have to keep on focusing on manufacturing because we deindustrialize too soon. We don't have a large enough manufacturing sector. And also, I would claim manufacturing is inherently important. Yeah, it's not just important because it provides jobs, but it's also because of the nature of the jobs that it provides. It's because it provides a way for people to work on assembly lines together, regardless of what the social background they're from. It allows you to make a living for yourself in a way that is not necessarily dependent upon the networks that you carry with you to the city from your village, or the networks that you can build up in your neighborhood. All right? The economy that we have right now is old-fashioned in the sense that it reinforces those very networks that modern manufacturing economies tended to dilute. So a lot of our problems that we look at now as being social problems are actually a product of the fact that we have an economy that has also not moved into the manufacturing age. So I'll just put that out there. Manufacturing is inherently important. Also, it is something that we just need more of because we have so little of it. It doesn't matter if the world as a whole is moving in another direction because we are so far behind the world, right? Next. Let us even suppose that it is true that by the time we can put into place a manufacturing sector, we no longer live in a world where large-scale, export-oriented manufacturing is a credible source of growth, okay? Which is, I think, what underlies a lot of the concerns that are expressed about a manufacturing focus.
Or of jobs.
Or of jobs. Growth or of jobs, yeah. I would make the claim that exactly what you argue for, or what many of us argue for, as the prerequisites for a sensible and functional manufacturing sector, namely openness to the world, solid infrastructure, flexibility of a certain number of input markets, more deregulation, these would not only help you develop a manufacturing sector, if the manufacturing sector is what provides growth and jobs, but also would allow your economy to adapt quickly to that unknowable future in which the source of growth and jobs is something else. So the question is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if manufacturing is the future, because what you need to do in order to get a manufacturing sector going is precisely what will help you adapt to whatever the future may be.
The place where it matters, right, is human capital. Right? And that is where we seem to be making big bets, whether that human capital is going to be adaptable. I agree with absolutely everything you said.
Yeah, I think that there is a big bet there. It's also a big bet that everybody else is making. I mean, recently I was in China, and you actually saw, I was attended a thing where they were trying to retrain steel workers. And it was fascinating, but I think it would work. I actually felt that these were people who had been steel workers for only 10 years of their life. I want you to imagine how quickly China has been moving through this. They became steel workers, and now they're told they're not going to be steel workers anymore, and they're preparing for another set of jobs. But it seemed like they were going to be prepared for that. So maybe that is the future, and we just have to be ready for it. Yeah.